Welcome back everyone, Oz here. Today we've got an old compilation from the Oz archives that's some revenge type stories, starting off with some pro-revenge and escalating to some of that nuclear revenge. Fun stuff from 5 years ago that I definitely really enjoyed recording, and I thought I would bring them back here. Don't forget, this whole kind of project is brought to you by Gamersubs. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. Every purchase made supports me directly. AK abuses my cats, I get him expelled. I have 4 cats. 3 outdoor, 1 indoor. That may seem like a lot, but it's actually the right amount for me. I rescued them all from some rundown apartments. Anyways, enough about my cats. I had this neighbor, let's call him AK, which stands for asshole kid. AK loved harassing my cats. He'd continuously pull out their hair, pull their tails, and at one point, he had kept my obese cow cat or piebald cat in his house until my cat found a way out. AK goes to the school I go to, and he's known for bullying the shy kid who I get along with. He never got in trouble because of lack of evidence. One day, when I was walking home from school, I saw him kicking my gray tuxedo cat and pulling on her tail. That was the final straw for me. I pick up my cat and run inside. My cat was fine, just a little hurt and shaken up. I had a plan to get AK suspended or even expelled. I didn't have my own phone at the time, just a little wristwatch that could call my parents. I needed a phone for this, and my dad had just bought a new phone, so I asked him if I could use his old one, and he agreed. The next day, I brought the phone to school, and whenever I saw AK bullying the shy kid, who we'll call SK because I'm lazy, I recorded it, secretly. By the end of the day, I had about 30 minutes of footage. I was about to turn it in when my friend told me that tomorrow, SK and AK were getting into a fight. Perfect. I stayed up all night editing the footage and turning it into a montage. The next day rolls around. Everyone is around AK and SK while they're getting ready to fight. AK throws the first punch. Perfect. After recording the fight for 3 minutes, I went to the principal, P, and showed her the recordings. P was furious and called SK and AK into her office. She asked me to explain, then AK, then SK. Me and SK were dismissed while AK had to stay. We talked on the way back to class, and it turns out SK is actually a pretty nice guy. The end of the day rolls around and AK hasn't been seen. As I walk home, I see AK crying on his front porch with his mom yelling at him. Turns out the kid got suspended. While he was suspended, he still harassed my cats. And I saw one of my cats with a broken leg, but I'm not sure if it was him. I was still pissed and wanted more revenge. 2 weeks later, he's back at school, still as bratty as ever. Coincidentally, there's a new girl at school. She had a lazy eye and was insecure about it. AK found that out and began bullying her about it. As time went on, it was worse. AK was sexually harassing her, telling her that her lazy eye is why everyone hated her, etc. I recorded and recorded and recorded until I had about 3 hours of footage in 1 week. I spent my whole weekend editing it and choosing the worst ones. I end up with a 10-minute video. Perfect. I go to school early and show P the montage. Her face is red and I can basically hear steam coming out of her ears. She calls AK to the front office again. When he comes in, I have the most smug look ever. He is visibly nervous. I give P my phone and she shows AK the entire 10-minute montage. P demands him to explain and he starts crying. He gives a crappy apology like, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that, I'm sorry." I don't exactly remember what it was, but I remember it was crappy. P calls the girl into her office and asks her to give her side of the story, and oh my god, it was disturbing. P is visibly infuriated but calmly asks us to go back to class. AK only goes back to class to get his things, and his face is more red than P's with tears rolling down his cheeks. I never saw him at school again, and I never saw him attack my cats again. One of my friends who was also friends with AK told me he was expelled and couldn't enroll in any other public schools, so he had to be homeschooled. SK, the girl, and I are all friends now, and we get along very well. They love my cats and would never hurt them. I still don't forgive the AK because what he did to my cats, SK, and the girl was awful. Let's do a quick tally of everything this little monster did. So first off, not only did he kidnap and abuse cats, but he also pretty much harassed and bullied a poor student relentlessly, and he also sexually harassed the new girl. Yeah, that's grounds for expulsion, so the right punishment was served. Neighbor won't properly care for his 2 dogs, and now he has no dogs. Not sure if this is petty or pro, but I was told to share this story with you guys. In May 2018, my husband and I bought our first home in a rural area about 45 minutes away from our hometown. Most of our neighbors are awesome, and we get along with everyone, except AN. Asshole neighbor. When we moved here, Ann had 2 hunting dogs that would break out of his backyard and terrorize the neighborhood. These dogs were beautiful, but Lord, they were awful. When they were in their yard, the dogs would bark all hours of the day. If a leaf blew in a new direction, barking. If a car drove by, barking. If I sneezed inside my own home, barking. If they were out of their yard, they'd run around and bite people and just be straight up assholes. It was ridiculous, but I would mind my own business. I have a 7-year-old and 2 friendly, well-behaved dogs, so these dogs worried me. But like I said, I'd mind my own. I never had any issues with AN until October. My husband was sick, so I decided to sleep on the couch. Just before the butt crack of dawn, I woke up to hear someone screaming for help. I did what any decent person would do, and I grabbed a pair of shorts, rushed outside without putting on any shoes, and run down the road to see what I could do. It was dark, but I saw their silhouettes under the streetlight. The 2 dogs had once again gotten out and were attacking a guy. I ran faster than I've ever ran in my life. I got them away from the man. He was drunk and stumbled off into the wee morning hours. I learned later that he stabbed one of the dogs in the mouth. Anyway, I got the dogs away from him and they also wandered away. When I started walking back to my house, I stopped at Ann's to tell him about his damn dogs and about the guy they were attacking. His girlfriend answered the door, and since my adrenaline was pumping, I told her, do something about your dogs before someone else does. She did not like that at all. She stormed out into their tiny carport and started threatening me, and her body language suggested that she wanted to fight me. I was standing in the street, and we live in Florida. I'm not about to screw with a stand your ground law anytime soon, and calling me names. She kept telling me how immature I am, that her 30-year-old boyfriend just had a pacemaker put into his chest and he can't handle the stress and blah blah blah. So he stood there for 30 minutes with her calling me anything else she could think of and being obnoxious while their dogs are still terrorizing the neighborhood. Her boyfriend, An, then walks outside and asks what's going on. She tells him that I want to kill their dogs. I don't. I just want them to shut up and stay in their yard. So An puts his thug pants on and says she doesn't know who she's screwing with. I'll be right back. I start walking away because I was done at that point and needed to get ready for work. Our conversation was going nowhere. An didn't give a damn about his dogs or their poor behavior. In his words, which were said a few days after this incident, they're hunting dogs. Attacking is what they do. An comes back outside and he's grabbed a gun. He points it at me, making gestures like he's going to shoot me in the head. I called 911, and when I'm on the phone with dispatch, An literally says he's going to shoot me in the head. I should also mention that when I rushed out the door, I woke up my husband, and now he's standing in our yard watching it all happen. The cops come, take statements and whatnot. Because I was a little further away from An when he pointed the gun at me, and it was dark, the officer couldn't arrest him. I know it was a gun. I'm pretty sure it was a 9mm, but the officers couldn't prove it. The sentence, she doesn't know who she's screwing with, really bothered me, and I don't really like to be threatened, so I decided to educate myself. I learned his name, date of birth, criminal history, occupation. I learned everything about An. First, I collected the police report, and it turns out An is on probation for felony theft. I call this probation officer. It's probably a violation of probation to have the cops call on you because of something like this. The cops mentioned something about aggravated assault. I called his landlord. They appreciated the photos I sent them of the awful condition of their property. I called the county about his dogs. They've always had issues with An and made an appearance at his house. I found his Facebook and sent public photos of him holding numerous firearms to his probation officer and his landlord. A felon can't own or have possession of a gun. Why would you have 2 hunting dogs if you're legally not allowed to have a firearm? A day later, we were at our other cool neighbor's house playing D&D, and we heard a commotion outside. An, his GF, and a bunch of their friends were outside cleaning their property. His landlord must have chewed him out. The dogs were gone, but they came back and continued to be assholes shortly after. About a month ago, the county told An that he needed to either rehome his dogs or face some hefty fines and legal action. Fast forward to now, An and his girlfriend learned who they are screwing with and avoid me at all costs, and their dogs are long gone. Apparently, they plan on moving away. I think they already did because I don't see his piece of crap Chevy out over there anymore. I haven't seen that drunk guy since then, and I hope he's doing okay. Also, An's GF is a manager at our local, name a fast food place that rhymes with Narbies, so I can't get their beloved curly fries anymore for fear of unknown bodily fluids in my food. Thus is life. At least I can sleep at night now that there aren't any dogs barking at everything 24/7, and that is so much tastier than curly fries.
That's my story. My husband still brags about it. If you point a gun at OP's head, she doesn't get scared, she gets angry. I hope you enjoyed. Honestly, the only loss here is that OP can't have those delicious curly fries anymore. Other than that, justice was served. My sister's bully would play Roblox on the school computer. Worst decision ever. So in my school, Roblox is a very popular game. Everyone who was cool played it. My sister would constantly go home crying because she got harassed for being a communist because our ancestors are from Eastern Europe. She's small and was an easy target to be picked on. After 11 weeks, I asked who was bullying her. She said that Evan, cover name, was bullying her. Evan was my friend, and I was outraged. As her older brother, I wanted revenge for her. She told me he played Roblox on the school computers when he was supposed to be doing schoolwork. I knew the kid's last name, and the passwords for the school computers were computer number plus first letter of first name plus last name. All I needed was the school computer he used, and told her my plan. She was so happy she cried tears of joy. She gave me the number, the plan was set. After my piano practice after school, I went to the computer lab to study. I went on Chrome and found his Roblox password. The password was in the school email account for students. The passwords were exactly like the computer login passwords. After getting the Roblox password and writing it down, I logged off and left the school entirely. When I got home, I logged into the account and looked at the settings. The best part? He didn't even have an email verified to his account, so he couldn't get it back. I called my sister over to destroy his Roblox account. After deleting very expensive items, I changed the bio of his Roblox account to Evan. If you're reading this, it's me, Mark. We're no longer friends because you can't stop bullying little girls who are defenseless. Next time, think before you do something. I changed his password after that. I didn't want our friendship to end this way, but he stopped bullying my sister and never talked to us again. No proof, no problem. Don't mess with a woman's best friend. No names because what I did was pretty illegal. I managed a bar and one day I came in to see the place totally ransacked. Thankfully, but weirdly, nothing was stolen, which meant it was someone with a personal vendetta. I had recently fired an employee who I suspected had done it. We hadn't been able to get his keys back yet, so he had a way to get in, and he knew the alarm codes since he would open the bar sometimes. I went to my office and saw that the lock on the door had been smashed in and the CCTV footage was deleted. The only thing that was missing was a clay mold of my dog's paw print I had taken right before she passed away. This dog was my first pet and was my best friend. I always talked about her and had brought her into the bar a couple times on my days off. We let pets on the patio, so all the employees knew how much she meant to me. I kept the mold on my desk so I could always have her with me. I was sure it was him. He hadn't taken his firing too well, but with no absolute proof, I couldn't just outright accuse him. The bar is a bikini bar and the dude was a total creep. On multiple occasions, he had made disgusting comments to the girls. The cherry on top was he came in drunk and groped the girls working. Men who came in could be gross, but the things he would say and did were on another level altogether. When I called all the employees to ask where they had been, he totally outed himself before I could even ask him. He said, "I was at home with my wife on Saturday night." I just smiled into the phone and said, "I never said it happened on Saturday." He quickly hung up. Gotcha, bitch. The police couldn't do anything with the camera footage deleted. All I had was him knowing it happened on a Saturday. Plus, the damage wasn't too bad, just a lot of smash plates and a lock on the door. So there wouldn't be much to sue him for if I did get proof. So I decided to get even and to get my dog's paw print back. He only deleted the night of the break-in, not the rest of the footage. So I combed through hours of footage to find the time he slapped the girl's ass and grabbed at her tits. But I found something even better. On the camera pointing to the back alley, he was screwing some chick, probably a prostitute, definitely not his wife, up against his car. Jesus, this dude was an idiot. He even smiled and waved to the camera. I copied the footage to a USB stick and put it in an envelope. I knew he had another job, so I waited there until he showed up and went inside. I stuck the envelope under his windshield wiper with a note. It read, "Give back what you stole or this will start popping up everywhere you go." It didn't take long for him to text me. I played dumb and acted like I knew nothing about it, but added, "Sounds like whatever you took was really important to the person." He told me to heck off and said he didn't have whatever I thought he took. I still played dumb. The next day, I left another USB in his mailbox. I knew his address from his W-2. And another on his windshield wiper again, for good measure. I guess he found them both because I received another string of texts asking what the hell is wrong with me. I still played dumb, but told him to give back whatever the person was asking for, and it would probably stop. He said he didn't have the paw print and was going to the police. Man, this guy was dumb as a bag of rocks. I told him only I knew the paw print was taken, and now I had proof he broke in for the police. No response. I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure what I was doing was just as illegal as him breaking in, if not worse. And he could have had a good case on his hands for blackmail, but he was dumb and probably just wanted it all to go away. Safe to say, the next day, one of my bartenders told me that the guy that was fired dropped off his keys and a package for me. In the package was my paw print, broken in half, with a letter that basically said he was sorry and he didn't mean to break it, and he was just pissed he got fired and to please stop leaving the video. I debated for a good while if I should send the video to his wife anyways, but I found out she was divorcing him because she had found the one in the mailbox. Smiley face. Did she just John Wick this guy? Because it kind of seems like she just did. I mean, dead dog, revenge. See the correlation? I'm pretty sure we can classify this as a John Wick pro-revenge, so that's my take on it. I should also add that what she did was illegal, as pro-revenge as it was. I mean, the dude did deserve it, but boy did she hit him hard. Like, oh my god. Try to end my soccer career? Let me end yours. Let's get straight to the point. I was around 14 years old and I had been playing in the quarterfinals of regionals. Long trip. The host was in North Carolina. I was really excited to play because if I performed very well, I would be promoted to a higher level. Anyways, let me get more into detail. I was on this soccer team where we had one big rival. This rival was a very good team, but had no sportsmanship. The goalkeeper is the one that I am focusing on. I am an attacking player on my team and had the most assists in the 5 divisions. It was normal for me to get targeted because I was one of the top players, statistically wise. So it was the quarterfinals and the regionals, and we were up against our rival. The goalkeeper had just saved my shot, so it was a corner. I let my teammate take it, so I had the chance to score. It was 1-1. He takes a corner, I jump up to get a header. Next thing you know, I am on the floor crying because I hurt my knee very badly. After finding out how it happened, I became insanely mad. My coach said the goalkeeper went out of his way to kick me in the knee with both of his feet while I was in the air. The goalkeeper wanted to single-handedly end my career. Unbelievable lack of sportsmanship. Absolutely gutted as I am now facing consequences of never playing again. I had torn my ACL, main ligament in the knee. However, my physical therapist said that through lots of rehabilitation, there was still a possibility that I could possibly go back to playing soccer again. Over the course of 1 year of physical therapy, the possibility of playing again was opened up. I was extremely happy when my physical therapist said I could play, but not at the same level. Of course, I was sad, but grateful that I could still walk. But that news did not stop me. My dad hired a personal coach. Over the course of 2 years, I had earned my position back on the top of the ODP, Olympic Development Program. We had entered our preseason tournament. However, before, I had to make the normal tryouts, then the ODP tryouts. Let's continue. Our first game in the round of 16 was, of course, the rival team. I had determination to destroy this team. The first half had ended and it was still 0-0. I really wanted to score, especially against the goalkeeper that tried to end my soccer career. It was halfway through the second half when an attack started. I had the ball and was 1v1 with the goalkeeper. In my head, I was like, I chipped it over him and scored. It was the game winner. However, that was not even the best part. As I chipped it over him, he went for the side tackle. In these moments, I had accidentally crushed his knee with both of my feet. He was in so much pain, he had to be carried off the field. Unfortunately, we lost in semifinals, but we were all happy where we got. After a while, it was a normal training season. My coach had pulled me over and brought up the incident. Of course, he was not happy that I hurt him, but he told me the goalkeeper had torn his ACL and fractured his tibia shin the day after I had hurt him. I rubbed it off and I was extremely happy when I found this out. The end. I won't give up till you are no longer a landlord. Warning, this is a long read, but the comments indicate it may be worth your time to read. I regretfully got an apartment with what is in my opinion the worst landlord ever. This man, I will call him Entitled Dick or ED, has the audacity to call himself a good person in court. Let me fill you in. I got an apartment shortly after being released from prison. Happy that someone was going to give me a chance to improve my life. This was clearly not the case. All was well for the first few months, then winter hit and the heat went out. It took 3 days for Entitled Dude to even answer his phone. By that time, his voicemail was full of complaints from his freezing cold tenants. He told me that the law gave him a reasonable time to fix it. We went 2 more weeks with no heat, using our stoves and camping in the kitchen in our respective apartments. When Entitled Dude got his electricity bill, he attempted to raise the rent on the apartments. Obviously, he was not allowed to by the city, so he refused to pay his electricity bill, thus denying all of us heat at all. This is where my OCD kicked in and I went full research mode. I studied every law in regards to federal, state, and city landlord-tenant laws and rights. I found so many violations it was no longer funny but scary. I studied building code. I studied the condition of all of his apartments. This was easier due to the fact that I was either friends with his tenants or had gone there to repair damages caused by frozen pipes and electrical outlets failing due to shoddy wiring and so forth. Entitled Dude had pissed off all of his tenants. Every last one of us was pissed to the point where they wanted to testify against him in court, but couldn't due to the financial hardships the living conditions we were in had been causing. I formulated a plan to get him to repair the buildings he owned. But ED had his own plan. January 2nd at 2 a.m. I was awoken by the smoke detectors in the whole building going off. I quickly ran to the back hall because no smoke was in my apartment yet, but I was on the top floor. I opened the door and was greeted by a thick wall of smoke. I quickly ran downstairs after shouting for my girlfriend at the time to get out of the house quick. I pounded on every door and screamed fire. I got as many people as possible to evacuate, but the floor with the fire no one was answering and to my knowledge contained children. So I panicked. At this point the fire department was there and began breaking in doors. I evacuated. After the fire was out and the investigation had started, I witnessed Entitled Dude give the tenant of that apartment's sister an envelope containing an undisclosed amount of cash, which was visible to anyone nearby. 2 weeks later, the results were released. Arson. The tenant had used hairspray to start the fire and hid the evidence in a hole she punched into the wall. The very person who had been given money by the landlord. Ironically, she was the only tenant who had paid rent in the whole building because she had started moving in 2 days prior. I had not known she was a tenant and her sister and kids had moved out the day before. I looked at Entitled Dude and told him I know what he had done, and I was not going to rest until he lost all his buildings. I then began asking his tenants for their stories about their interactions with Entitled Dude. This is where things got real. He had been accused of everything from ripping off employees, theft, grand theft auto, bank fraud, and so much more. I formulated a new plan. I sucked up to him and made it known I am a computer tech. Entitled Dude had a few broken computers and some printer and network issues. I was in. We worked a deal on payment for back rent. I knew he was not good for his word, but it was all part of the plan. Once I got his passwords and logins, I copied his entire hard drive to my portable one. I copied all his emails in his business account and printed his financial records on my Wi-Fi printer, which was next door. After I fixed his computers and network, I then went home to review my newfound evidence. It was enough. More than enough. I contacted code enforcement with all of the violations of code for every building, including the illegal electrical installation in his new office without permits or even an electrician. He was immediately investigated. That night, I found a 7-day notice to quit on my door. My roommate was worried, but I filled him in on the plan. Remembered I studied all those laws and rights? Well, we got to court and I opened with, "Your Honor, I have proof of a clear violation of the Warranty of Habitability Act." The eviction was thrown out and he was forced to repair my apartment with me still in it immediately. The next month I was given another eviction notice. Still, he is losing money due to the fact that I was teaching his tenants landlord-tenant rights and the laws associated with it. Entitled Dude kept losing his court dates and kept being told to fix stuff and was continuously fined by the courts and the code enforcement. He was sinking fast. Back to that fire. The woman living there was arrested for arson and charged with 2 counts due to the accidental electrical fire on New Year's Day turned out to be ruled intentional. So the hairspray was in reality attempt 2. He was under investigation for conspiracy to arson and other charges. I wasn't done yet. We went to court again for my non-payment of rent. I went again based on the Landlord Retaliation Act because I had contacted code enforcement and can prove his blatant retaliation, and the judge didn't even listen to entitled dude. Needless to say, spending the winter without heat took a toll on us tenants. We bought electric heaters and informed the power company that the landlord had shut off all the power to his building and was requiring the tenants to pay for their own power. Well, apparently, his illegal wiring caught up to him. He had wired apartments to run off of each other, and the common areas were now attached to wiring in every apartment. This put entitled dude in a rough position, as local law says it's the landlord's responsibility to supply power to all common areas. This means his shoddy workmanship and illegal wiring prevents him from legally disconnecting the power. The power company turned on all the power and locked his ability to shut it off until the wiring of the common areas was repaired and separated from the apartments. This would cost thousands. Thousands we know he didn't have. Entitled dude was panicking. He kept losing at court, people were legally withholding rent, he couldn't shut off services, and the fines were debilitating. He kept blaming his tenants and refused to repair things. One by one, the buildings were condemned, and entitled dude was required to pay for relocation of his tenants by law. Well, he didn't. He couldn't. He was arrested for attempting to sell 3 buildings the city confiscated from him, and for selling one that was condemned. Entitled dude got what he deserved. He lost every building he owned, got charged with all kinds of fraud, and was investigated for other crimes I am still unaware of. But I wasn't done. He caused a lot of suffering. I gave his financial records to the IRS with all the internal memos and everything I got from his computers. Also, I provided the local authorities and code enforcement with the same things. Entitled dude was screwed. I have since gotten a new apartment, and everything he owned has been taken by the city, state, and IRS. I have not seen entitled dude in 3 years, and all of his properties have been bought by someone new, repaired, and have all new tenants who are happy with their new landlords. The old tenants got better places with decent landlords. And what about your wonderful entitled dick? He is serving multiple sentences for crimes he has committed and is already not getting out anytime soon. Yet the investigations are not done and the charges keep coming. Entitled dude is somewhere in some prison regretting meeting this tenant. Moral: don't be an ED unless you want to meet the moral enforcer. You know, the landlord literally decided not to be a cheap bastard and pay for heating and get it fixed while they were dealing with a cold winter. He would probably actually still be walking around with us today. But no, instead he had to basically put people's lives on the line in a winter with no heating. Nice. And you got mad at them when they tried to stay alive. Nice. Bank screws old lady, lawyer screws bank. Old lady gets millions back. Posted this on Ask Reddit a while back, and somebody suggested I should cross post here. Financial advisors employed by a pretty major bank stole all the money of a wealthy old lady who was dying of Alzheimer's, and she didn't know anything until her lights were cut off. My brother was a pretty small-time lawyer and got the call to represent her. Every other big-time attorney in the area had either passed in the case or tried and failed to get anywhere. When you're up against a legal team that makes a collective $10,000 an hour, it's not easy. And since banks always have mandatory arbitration clauses worked in their contracts, she couldn't sue or even do discovery. Like, it was obvious what had happened, and the only people with access to the account were clearly implicated. But A, it was too hard to prove without any access to bank records, and B, under arbitration, it wouldn't matter anyway. They could be criminally prosecuted, but the bank wouldn't have to pay back the money. Did I mention the bank had, at this point, frozen the lady's access to her own accounts due to fraud? So she couldn't even get her own bank statements. Anyway, my bro became pretty obsessed with avenging this woman. By the time he got the case, she barely even knew what her own situation was most of the time. But her son just wanted to make the bank bend over, and my brother was all in. He managed to find an incredibly obscure technicality that nullified the arbitration clause, and was able to force a major bank into the discovery process. That alone was a huge enough deal that the decision was written up in many legal newspapers across the country.
After fighting and delaying discovery until the very last minute, the bank dumped 200 plus boxes of documents on my brother the Friday before the Monday discovery hearing. He had 72 hours to go through tens of thousands of pages of documents. He rented himself a hotel for the weekend so he'd have no disturbances, had a friend bring a dolly and hand truck the boxes to the hotel room, and got to work. In one of the boxes was an email between a bank VP and the bank's chief lawyer. I incorrectly described this as two VPs in my previous post, discussing how there would never be a discovery process, so there was no need to destroy documents, i.e. future evidence, and also saying that they weren't worried about the little old lady's lawsuit since the bank had frozen her accounts, so she wouldn't be able to pay her lawyer and he was just a small-time country lawyer. Their words, who would surely quit once he wasn't being paid. It wasn't like he worked for some huge firm that could just pay his bills while he worked. They also discussed how the lady would likely die of Alzheimer's before her accounts would be unfrozen once the fraud was proven to be false. Oh, but they had my bro all wrong. Of course, he was working all day on paying cases and then staying up half the night working on this one, sometimes without getting paid anything for months. We did the math later, he made about $2.75 an hour for his work over a span of 7+ years. Anyway, these chuckleheads openly discussed several illegal acts and emails to each other, and then openly failed to destroy the paperwork proving they had actually undertaken those acts. Which, legally, they could have destroyed at the time, but they were so arrogant, they thought they didn't have to. When my brother entered that into evidence Monday morning, they immediately motioned for a recess and offered to settle for an undisclosed sum. He also won his client $10 million in a separate part of the lawsuit. One agent recently finished serving a long sentence in the same federal prison as Bernie Madoff. He also lost his home, the beach home he bought with the old lady's money, had his financial broker license revoked, and his wife left him. However, his kid did get a private college education paid for in cash with the lady's money, and he bought $200,000 worth of wine that was never recovered. Sadly, the lady did in fact die before the case settled, so the money went to her son and to a large charitable trust that then elected my brother as the main trustee. So he gets to disperse the money he won in the settlement and see a lot of people benefit from his work. The funniest part of this revenge was that the apparent motive for the theft was not that the agent wanted to be rich, he had accomplices, but he was the main mastermind. He specifically wanted to use the money to enhance his standing in the community. So actually, he donated a lot of the stolen money to charities so that he could be invited to huge galas, get philanthropic awards, etc. Now he is broke, unemployed, divorced, and disgraced. While my brother is going to galas and getting philanthropic awards with the money this guy helped pay for with the sale of his houses, cars, etc. Pretty sweet. This whole case kind of reminds me of Better Call Saul. Anyone else kind of getting that, feeling with the Sandpiper Crossing lawsuit in the beginning, season 1, that lasted until like season 3? Yeah, that might just be me. Biological mother tries to cause me emotional turmoil, so I take what she believes gives her value. Her man. Now, I know you must be thinking, what kind of Jerry Springer pro-revenge story am I getting myself into reading? Well, I promise, it's not a Jerry Springer episode, and it's not what you think. So, a little bit of backstory here. I didn't grow up in the best environment. I've experienced some crazy things, so, of course, I have some wild stories. My biological mother is, quite frankly, one of the worst people on the planet. I suffered physical and mental abuse from her. She is addicted to methamphetamine and is Christian, but with a touch of insanity. She believes that she is a saint, yet she can't get the Bible right. For instance, I was originally supposed to be right-handed, but because of her deluded belief, she thought that was the devil's hand. So she put a sock on my right hand and forced me to write with the left, and would hit my right hand with a metal ruler if I tried to use it. I'm sure many of you know that the left hand is actually the devil's hand. Ironic, really. Luckily, the last time I ever saw her was when I was 10. At 16, 5 years after I had been adopted, she found me on Facebook and I tried to give her a chance, but she barely talked to me and never apologized for anything, so I left it at that. We don't have a relationship. Fast forward some years, I've turned 20 and I'm making my first big move. I moved several states away from the one state I lived in my entire life. I also desperately wanted to leave because of the constant reminder that she was only 1 hour away from me. I went to meet my biological father and his side of the family and agreed to work with him. They are amazing people. I got to live in a big city, have a cool, trendy, but very dangerous job, and party with the rich people on weeknights. I was living it up. My dad stood back, let me have fun, and made sure I was safe, all while posting me on his social media, doing events and showcasing the product I made that he helped me design. You know, being a proud father at the fact that I was interested in his profession and with his help actually made a successful product. My biological mother was on his social media and saw it all. After almost a year of it, I guess she finally lost it. I had no idea she knew where I was or what I was doing because I didn't have her on any of my social media, but that all changed. She found my Instagram and sent me a private message. What I would endure was enough to send me off the rails. The first message I got was telling me about how much of an ungrateful bitch I was, that I ruined her life and that she should have killed me when she had the chance, and that I asked for deserved everything that was done to me in her care. I, of course, defended myself, telling her that she doesn't know a damn thing about me and that she couldn't tell me what I was or wasn't, and that she was no mother of mine. Here comes the disgusting part. She accused me of sleeping with my own father. I was disgusted and I actually felt sick to my stomach having to read something that messed up. And that is when the anger really took over. She never spent a day in prison for the crime she committed against me. Every time she got arrested, she'd rat on her dope cook, which resulted in her getting released. And I was out for revenge. I wanted to take what gave her value, and I know this woman better than anyone. She believes that what gives her value is having a man. And I took him from her. Yes, I know it sounds bad, but trust me, it's not what you think. Let me explain. Because she messaged me on Instagram, I obviously had access to hers. Mine was private just in case she decided to try to re-enter my life. Hers, on the other hand, was wide open and I could do all the snooping that I wanted. And that I did. I no longer had my Facebook, but my dad mentioned that he did, so I did the obvious. Get on his account to see if they were friends. They were. More snooping. I found out a few things. 1. She had a boyfriend that she flaunted, and 2. He has 3 beautiful little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls. They were all living in my deceased grandfather's house. Now, I couldn't remember the address, so I went to the Google Street View, typed in the town, and looked at every church there until I came across the one I knew all too well, directly across the street from my grandpa's house. The Street View blurred the address on his mailbox, but it didn't blur the churches, so I was able to figure it out, and this is when my plan sets in motion. I convinced my dad to pretend to be an uncle that was worried about my mental health, and of course worried about the safety of those 3 beautiful little girls, which I did truly worry about. If she could do the things she did to me, her own daughter, who knows what she was doing to those 3 girls that weren't hers. I had him call the Child Protective Services department that handled my case. Surprisingly, after 10 years, they still remembered me, but more importantly, they remembered my biological mother. I listened in and whispered in my dad's ear the entire time. I had him play the uncle because I was afraid that if it was me and my dad against her, they would suspect collusion. So, worried uncle was the perfect third party. We told them everything, every disgusting message she sent me, and I could hear them typing it all into the computer. We also made sure that they knew that I went through a closed adoption and that I get to decide whether or not I'd like a relationship with her, that I do not want that. So she was not only breaking the law by contacting me, but she was also doing it in a harassing manner. After the long talk with the messages, the lady asked my uncle if there was anything else she should know about, and this is where I took her man. I made sure my dad told them my grandfather's address, her boyfriend's name, and that he has 3 little girls living there with her. We voiced our concerns about the safety of those children, stating she abused her own daughter to the point the state had no choice but to take her one last time to ensure the little girl's survival, and that she isn't allowed to be around children, to which the CPS lady responded, "You're right, she's not allowed to be around children. We will be out to that location as soon as possible." The next day, all the photos of her boyfriend and his 3 little girls were deleted from all her social media accounts. I spent 11 years in the system, so I didn't have to be there to know what happened, but just in case you don't, I'll tell you how it went. A social worker showed up to the house, asked to speak to the father, to which they informed him that his children were at risk living with my bio mom. that she's not allowed to live with children, and that if he didn't vacate his children from the property immediately, they would be forced to take them into protective custody. He, like any good father would do, left that day with his children. The good news, she has not contacted me since, and the best part about it is that I know that she knows I'm the one that fucked up for her. I took away what gave her value, and there's not a damn thing she can do about it. See, what makes a good revenge is not just making sure that you hit them hard, but hitting them hard where it hurts, and OP did exactly that. She knew exactly what would make her mom squirm, and she targeted that and executed perfectly. So, good on you, OP. Today I screwed up by potentially ruining my ex's life. So this is actually collectively a few days worth of screw-ups. First off, background story. Ex cheated on me for 2.5 years worth of our 6-year relationship. I found out by a mutual friend of ours accidentally spilling the beans. She lived with her parents on the other side of the state when I moved away for college, important later. Relationship over at that point. Fast forward to about a few months ago when I was cleaning out my apartment to move again. Found a ton of her stuff, including various adult toys, including a harness and restraints. Put it all in a box intending to get rid of it. Super resentful of her at this point. Her parents are super conservative Christians living in a Bible club area on a lake. People would go on like getaways there. I'm not entirely sure of the terms it's actually called, but that's how I understand it. Anyways, cue one bad day of drinking and venting to a vengeful girl who hated her guts from day one. And she gives me the idea to ship all her toys to her address with dad's name on the box, with a letter that states exactly what happened and why I stopped seeing her, etc, etc. Didn't think anything of it, signed off with your daughter left a few things at my apartment, she might want them back to help her life with John. Dad received the package Friday, messaged me today saying thanks for making me aware of what my sinful daughter has done to you. Please don't think bad of us, we were unaware this had happened. The situation has been taken care of. Turns out, taken care of means kicked out of the house and entirely excommunicated from her family. Her parents want nothing to do with her and won't speak to her. She's now homeless and has nowhere to go because basically John doesn't have the space to take her in yet. So, not only did I get back at her in the most spiteful way, I may have ruined her chance at a stable life, and heaven only knows what will happen here on out. Nobody screws with my dog. This took place way back in 6th grade, towards the end of the year. I live on the same street as this kid I will call Dan. I have a dog that is about 7 years old and loves being outside to play with the neighbor kids during warm weather when everyone's out. Well, on some random day of the year, Dan must have been feeling edgy because he came out of his house and just beat the hell out of my dog with a plastic bat, right in front of my sister. She ran into the house bawling, telling us what just happened. We ran outside and picked up our dog and rushed him to the vet. After not too long of a wait, the vet came out and told us our dog was alive and that he should recover over the next week or two. Now, my parents were angry, and they took this to Dan's parents, explaining what he did to our dog. They seemed to be understanding of the situation and told us that they were sorry and that they will punish Dan severely. But I was immensely furious. This did not satisfy my anger towards Dan at all. Now here's the deal. I never really liked Dan. He was pretty dickish at school, we were both in the same grade, but not necessarily towards me, but towards my close friends. And I guess I had been ignoring it for far too long. We were in the same grade, and something the school does every year for 6th graders is have a big science fair towards the end of the year, and everybody tries to make these super elaborate projects. This is where I start my master plan. Once everyone was getting close to finishing their projects, I look around the classroom to try to locate Dan's project. His is along the lines of some sort of aerodynamic rocket that travels really fast down a clothesline in a small amount of time. Perfect. I check out the rocket and the rocket has a fuse. Too perfect. That night, I go home and look at my firework inventory I had left over from last year's 4th of July. Sure enough, I still had a huge belt of firecrackers left. So, I went over my plan on what to do. After school the next day, I dissected Dan's rocket and put in as many firecrackers as I could and made sure that they would be set off once the fuse was lit. I put everything back together as if no one had touched it at all. Skip ahead a few weeks and it's the day of the science fair. It took place in our gym and we were supposed to be next to our projects all morning as the judges came around to judge them.
So, from my point of view, I couldn't see where Dan was presenting, but I paid close attention to every noise in the gym. About half an hour into the science fair, I heard an enormous explosion from the end of the gym and a loud crash. The blast was stronger than I had thought. The rocket was obliterated along with Dan's hearing. One of the beams that held the clothesline fell over and broke some glass on some other poor kid's project. There was a lot of shouting and all the adults rushed over to that end of the gym to see what had happened. I stood perfectly still. I just sat there giggling at my handiwork, knowing how traumatized Dan must be. I felt no sympathy, only villainous satisfaction. So this story was originally posted as a pro-revenge story, but just because of its contents, it has the honor of being escalated to nuclear revenge. This is a long one, folks, so buckle in. When enough is enough, people lose jobs and go to prison. This pro-revenge took place when I was in high school in the mid-2000s, a time in my country when there was much public outcry over bullying, hazing, and boarding schools. A couple of students in different schools had died from injuries resulting from bullying. Other schools were rioting and burning stuff. They were under increased scrutiny. It was a whole thing. Personally, my life in high school was not fun. I was a fat boy with low self-esteem going into my first year. The bullying I experienced quickly led to depression. I was prone to self-harm and reckless and a bit of suicidal ideation. The thing that made high school particularly nightmarish though was the sexual abuse. Low-key comments about my sexuality from this group of about 5 boys in 4th form. They called me and my best friends gay. The social stigma associated with homosexuality here is really extreme. The boys would stalk and terrorize me. They left threatening notes under my sheets. "We're going to fuck you up for being a fucking gay. We're going to fucking rape you," etc. So I only had one close friend who knew what was going on. Ironically, after an entire term of convincing everyone that I was gay, this same group began sexually abusing me. I'll spare you the details, but my first year in high school was the worst time of my life. But you're not here for my sad story, so moving on. Sometime in the middle of the term, the vice principal, VP of our school, was changed due to the aforementioned public backlash from the bullying scandals. The previous VP was a decent man, but the new VP was not. He came with a well-earned reputation of being unnecessarily harsh, dishing out suspensions and expulsions like candy on Halloween. The last straw. A few weeks after the new VP came in, and I'm having an incredibly bad week that is really battering my mind. Yes, the bullying and sexual abuse was still going on. Now, every Friday night, a group of kids used to climb through a window into the computer lab and play video games. The windows had bars on them, but a slim person could fit through. I am not slim by any definition unless the definition is fat. Among this group of kids was this troublemaker dude in my class and my dorm with the same common name. Turns out the VP had confused the two of us, and I was the one who was in his crosshairs. That Friday the kids were caught. Some of them, including my namesake, managed to escape. The VP was called in and the students who were caught snitched. Security was sent to the dorms to bring the other culprits. Cue me being woken up at 3 a.m. in the morning and dragged to the scene of the crime to endure a beating for something I hadn't done. Corporal punishment was technically legal then and now. My explanation that there is clearly no way for me to fit through the window were met with more cannings. What really pissed me off was that VP had us bring our belongings to his office at night for an inspection with the excuse of searching for stolen computer equipment. He came across my very private journal, and, like the dick he was, he proceeded to ridicule me for having a diary in front of the teachers, watchmen, and the students I was bundled with. It didn't help matters that I broke down and cried in front of them. I don't think I have ever felt such humiliation in my life before. The following morning, we were suspended for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, my parents took me back to school. I had only told them of the mistaken identity that I suspected and the wrongful accusation. They already knew about the bullying. I didn't tell them about the VP going through my diary or the sexual stuff. I was still writhing in humiliation. The VP, being the absolute bunghole that he was, had convinced himself that I was the ringleader of this group of boys. Again, mistaken identity, and thus deserved extra punishment. He ordered me to clear out a large patch of weeds and overgrown grass between the rugby pitch and the hockey field, about the size of a football field, using only a slasher. Just as I'm about to head out, it starts raining and it's the middle of July. So much cold. Temperatures regularly dipped to below 10 degrees Celsius at night. So, instead of going to the field, I head to class to wait out the rain. A few minutes later, the VP barged in furious, interrupting the geography lesson. He proceeded to tear me a new one, even mentioning my private journal. And then, he threatened to expel me if I left the field before I finished my punishment. Mind you, this was one of the best schools in our region. It had actually been my first choice. He then proceeded to cane me again just to make his point stick. At this point, I just broke. All of this punishment was due to something that I had not done. I was completely innocent, but this asswipe just couldn't listen. The ridicule, the humiliation, the bullying, and the abuse all just came to a head at that point. And I decided to just fuck it all to hell. So I walked out into the rain, slasher in hand, with not even a sweater. This was about 4 in the afternoon. I never returned. I think the VP never really expected me to complete the punishment. But then, I doubt he had ever met someone who decided they had no more fucks left to give either. My initial plan was to crucify him with his own words. Dusk fell with me cold and drenched, ripping up ferns from the ground. By midnight, I was shivering and crying uncontrollably, and it was too dark to see anything. I still persevered and started blindly cutting the grass, driven by this mad desire to just hurt. I really didn't care who I hurt. Sure, a part of my motivation was that if I did get sick out here, the VP would be in a fuck of trouble. But there was another part of me that was just like, fuck it, life sucks anyways. By midnight, I was too cold to continue. I ran out of energy and just sat down under a tree. Towards dawn, I was so cold from the rain and the wind that my shivers began reducing. It was impossible for me to sleep. The teachers finally found me there a couple hours after dawn. Apparently, the teacher on duty had found my desk empty during morning study time, between 4:30 and 6 a.m. When he asked where I was, it came about that I had not been in bed the previous night either. He then called the VP and the other teachers, who began searching the school, and they finally found me in the field. The pro revenge. I don't remember much about what happened immediately after. I was so out of it. I do remember the teachers rushed me to the school nurse, who immediately recommended I be taken to the hospital. I spent a week there due to complications, pneumonia, and a very expensive week it was. All on the school's dime. My parents were pissed as fuck, and I couldn't blame them. The school's board of governors convened after my parents contacted them. The days before my parents and I were called to speak before the board, I had the idea just to face my fears and put everything out in the open. I was just done with that school and everybody there. So, on that day, in front of a group of musty old men in the boardroom, I finally shed my burden. I told them everything, my only motivation being to bury that VP and my tormentors. I don't think I've ever done anything that scary before. From the mistaken identity, the suspension, the punishment in the rain, the threat to expel me if I decided to seek shelter, and the crown jewel, the bullying and the sexual abuse. I laid it all out. I knew that would definitely get their attention. The board called my best friend, who backed me up. The VP was in no position to win a he said, they said contest with us at that moment. The VP was fired that day. A few days later, a zero-tolerance policy on bullying was announced. I think the board was actually afraid of finding themselves in the news for all the wrong reasons. They didn't want their school to be one of those schools, despite the fact that it was one of the worst. Over the holidays, my friend told me that things got really serious after that. People didn't know why, but suddenly any act of bullying was met with immediate and unconditional expulsion. As for the boys who had been terrorizing me, they were arrested. My dad went to the police with threatening notes I had been receiving all year long. The school board supported us in this, on the condition that we, my parents and I, do not take the story to the media. I was happy with that arrangement. I had no desire to be the face of male rape victims. Oof. We had a few meetings with an investigator from the public prosecutor's office. A couple of months later, the office reached out, told us that the boys had pled guilty. One of them got off scot-free because his dad was some senior army guy. Corruption, shake my head. 3 of them got 10 years each. The last one got 18. The topping? They were all in their 4th and final year. They got arrested just as they were about to sit for the national exams to go to university. Their lives are ruined, and I have absolutely no remorse for them. And neither do I.
Hippity hoppity, you damaged my property. Bibbity boppity, I'm calling the coppity. Bibbity boppity boo, they're taking your kids too.
This happened shortly after college. My mom is a retired, disabled woman who now owns her house on a quiet residential cul-de-sac. She has lived there longer than anyone else. Her neighborhood has designated parking spaces at the end of the cul-de-sac, all with the addresses of each house painted in the parking space. My mom doesn't get out much, so I use her designated parking space. At the time, we lived in the same city and I visited her weekly to bring groceries, fix broken things, cook for her, etc. My mom parked her car in the backyard of her house since she went out so little. Mom kept busy by gardening or baking/buying cookies for the children on the street. Mom's neighbor, Ivy, never parked well. Whenever I stopped by, her car was always parked so close to my car that I had to park on the curb. I wouldn't have cared about Ivy's piss poor parking, but for two things. She had 4 or 5 kids and had parties almost every weekend, leaving trash in my mom's yards. 2. I loved my car, a 2016 metallic ice blue Dodge Challenger Hellcat. Oof. The first car I had ever purchased brand new. I washed that car once a week, detailed the interior, and had rules against eating, drinking, or even leaving trash in my car. It was my pride and joy. Mom had called the police throughout Ivy's residence because of the parties. Ivy's guests would fill up the cul-de-sac with their cars, obstructing traffic and getting into loud, drunk fights at and after midnight. I often found empty beer bottles, empty condom wrappers, cigarette butts, and empty crack baggies on the fence between the properties, mostly on Ivy's side of the fence. This is all important information. One Saturday while having dinner at Mom's house, I heard a loud crash and my car alarm went off. I ran outside to see Ivy's older model Honda Accord back out of her parking space and speed down the street. Ivy's Accord had a dent from the front bumper to the door and the headlight had popped out. I approached my Challenger with trepidation and screamed in anguish at what I saw. My car, my beautiful 3-week-old car with less than 500 miles on it, had a dent stretching from the passenger's door to the front bumper, and the right front wheel was tilted at a 30-degree angle. I was livid and in anguish as I called the police, filed an online claim with my insurance, and arranged for a tow truck to take my damaged car to the dealership. The estimated cost of the repairs came out to $3,400 USD. Total cost of repairs was eventually $6,500 USD. I had a low insurance deductible of $100 USD, but my car was parked and Ivy owed for the damages. For 2 weeks, I knocked on Ivy's door or waited for her to come home. She stopped driving her damaged Accord and either rented or borrowed a Ford Fusion. When she was home, she didn't answer the door. When she wasn't, she stayed away until my rental car, a Dodge Charger, left my mom's parking space. I left a note on Ivy's door for her to call me, but only received harassing calls from restricted phone numbers or people blaring air horns in my ear when I answered. The revenge. About 2 weeks after the accident, Ivy's children came to Mom's house for some cookies. I noticed that 2 of them had bruises around their eyes. If Ivy hadn't hit my car, I still would have done what I did, but maybe not as underhandedly. I had Mom take pictures with and of the children, but waited until the next party to strike. Ivy had a party that night or the night after. Mom called me to let me know, and I installed an app onto my phone that gave me a fake phone number. I called 911 and reported a party. There's a loud party at 1007 Mountain Drive, and I'm worried because the children are around all these drunk adults. Please, hurry. Mom called to let me know the police had arrived. I drove to her house, stopping by the grocery store first, so that appeared to be the reason, and saw Ivy and her boyfriend Bane already sitting in the back of a squad car. From a news broadcast that night, I found out that Bane had warrants out for his arrest. Initially, the charges were disorderly conduct and disturbing the peace. However, Mom turned over the photos of the children, anonymously mailing them through the post office with Ivy's address and name as the return address. Less than a week later, Ivy and Bane were charged with child abuse charges. I think Bane was charged with more severe charges as well for abusing Ivy's daughter. Either way, the children ended up in foster care, and Ivy and Bane ended up in prison. Dude, I want to know what field this dude went into to be able to afford a freaking Dodge Challenger Hellcat at a college. Like, seriously, man. Like, what do? Do you just go into debt for fun or what? I mean... Anyways, now that I finished my little rant here, I'm going to read the too long didn't read for this post because boy is it brilliant. My car was hit by such a foul witch. Being a pro, I played a snitch. Her children had bruises, she had no excuses. My plan went well, no hitch. Nice. As a fair warning, this one's a bit tough to read, so I will be supplementing occasional words here and there, just as a heads up. Ensure your phone is backed up before you come for me. So I used to work for a phone repair store in the UK, and on many occasions we have people that come in for repairs to their phone, from software reboots to full technical repairs. We had a guy that came in with an older Samsung phone asking for repair on their phone. We'll call this guy Sam for the Samsung phone. So I greeted him and asked him what the issue was with his phone. He starts to explain that certain parts of his phone screens are inactive and it's not working with pressure. A quick check shows that indeed the phone screen has issues, and I begin to ask some simple questions. So how long did the phone for? Does it matter? You're a repair shop. You can fix it. I need to ask so that if we need to repair the phone, we can do it under warranty. If not, you'd have to pay for the parts. Sam looked at me like I've literally asked him to sacrifice his firstborn child. Why the fuck would I pay for an issue when it's clearly a technical issue? I start to explain that some phones have warranty to cover certain parts over a period of time. He is not having it. I don't know, but as a customer of Samsung for 10 years, I think I should have this done for free. I'm really sorry, but it doesn't work that way. Looking up on the system, your phone is just outside the warranty, so to repair the screen, it would cost XX. I've done it now. The guy starts up and starts bellowing at the top of his voice. Customers in this shop stop and stare, and all I can do is look on as this guy starts to tear into me. Listen to me. You're going to repair my phone, you fat asshole. I forgot to say, I am a slightly larger built guy. It's a regular thing that gets thrown my way. I've been with Samsung for years, and they would be disgusted at your customer service. I want your manager. I want to talk to someone who isn't an arrogant little shit. I weave over the manager and sit down and listen while this guy explains to him how rude and belittling I was to this guy, how I was overcharging him for repair when it should be free. The manager knows this isn't me and tries to explain the procedure. The guy full-on screams at the manager and causes such a scene that other customers turn and walk straight out. This guy is going to cause us to have no customers left. The manager calls head office and explains the situation. As a goodwill gesture, they will allow us to repair the phone for free. The manager lets the customer know and he sits down, happy with himself. I have to sit and watch Sam smugly sit with the manager and tell him that they should employ better customer service employees while booking in the phone. I'm on the verge of tears and begin to serve the other shocked customers in the store. My manager asks the guy if he's backed up his phone, as part of policy for repairs is the phone be cleared. I brace myself as Sam suddenly rears up again. That's disgraceful. I haven't backed anything up and I have 100 of important contacts on that phone. If they are removed, I will sue you and that over there for everything you have. So before this guy has an aneurysm in the store and to prevent further explosion, my manager sighs and starts to back up the phone on the system. Rare occasions we can do to nice people, I always do it for the older person as they are always nice to me. We get the guy to sign the paperwork and explain the procedure of the repair. 20 minutes later it's done and meets his girlfriend outside the store. The lady is younger than Sam and very pretty, blonde hair and tall and slim. This will become relevant later. He starts to talk to her in the store and she looks in and laughs. An hour later, I get a call from head office. Apparently this guy called them and explained the way I acted to this guy. Lies, all of them, from being rude to threatening to him. Even with backup from my manager, they wanted to have an informal meeting with me as they wanted to retrain me on my customer service. I was hurt, my manager was apologetic and knew that it wasn't my fault, but there was nothing I could do. I'm not the person who is malicious or angry, but this was just unfair. When I left the repair shop, my manager explained that this guy told a lot of bullcrap about what I said to him, and his wife backed him up despite not being there. There were no cameras in the shop part where I work, so they couldn't verify if the woman had been there. So I needed to ensure that this guy got some payback. So a few days later, the guy's phone needed a screen replacement as well as a logic board. So the phone was cleared of all of its data. Part of our testing is to ensure that the software and some testing data is put onto the phone in case any issues come up. I start the process and begin to back up the phone as well as update the data. I thought to ensure that it wasn't something on his phone which caused the issue. I would restore the phone to test. Now, this guy isn't very smart. As his data streams onto the phone, you can see the file names and small thumbnails of the images as they upload. This is some standard photos, holidays, pictures of his wife, drinks, the typical middle-aged, I've got a camera so I'll take photos of everything. Then, some rather adult-orientated ones come up. This is normal when looking through people's phones. As I begin to minimize, as I really don't fancy seeing what this guy gets up to, several photos of this guy come up with a woman. But this woman isn't his wife. This was someone very different. This woman was black-haired and in a rather unflattering position with this guy involving himself with this woman. Then, another woman, a darker-skinned lady, flashes up again in a similar position. I minimize this as I don't want to see any more. But I know I've got my payback. This is my chance. I stop the process and clear the phone of data. I use the spare data, completed the checks, and get the phone ready for collection. So I call the guy and explain that his phone is repaired. About fucking time, was the response. He explains that he will be in an hour's time, just before we close. I explained to my manager about this guy coming in, and due to being short-staffed, he said I'd have to deal with him. He was worried this guy would start again on me. However, I wanted to help him with his phone. So Sam sits down at my desk with his girlfriend beside him. I politely begin to explain the repairs, but this guy doesn't give a crap about the words coming out of my mouth. He just looks at me in a condescending way, like I don't know what I'm talking about. I've done this so much that I know more than you. When I finish, I explain I need to put his data back on the phone. I hear a, "Hurry up, will you? I've got to be somewhere than sitting here with you." This came from his girlfriend this time, so she was just as rude as he was. So without another word, I plug the phone in and begin the restoring process. Now, our front desks have fairly large monitors at an angle so both customers and staff can see them, as we do training with customers on new handsets, show them images of the repair, etc. Normally, I would minimize the software to keep the privacy of the customer. Not this guy. I full screen the software and ensure that the preview image is big enough for them both to see. The shop is empty at this point, so I know no unsuspecting children are about to see this show. The guy sits back and the girlfriend huffs, crossing her legs and sitting back in the seat. The images begin to flash up. They talk about their dogs and the time they went for a weekend away. They comment on how nice Portugal was as a holiday when a picture of a sunny veranda flashes up and that they should go back this weekend. I sit back and bite my lip. I'm worried that I'm being too petty. Shame. People like this guy won't be able to afford first class. Shame. I smile politely at this woman, looking at me with sympathy. I suppose I won't. I know that this is needed to knock them down a peg. Then it happens. The lady with the black hair pops up, and immediately the guy knows he's about to be rumbled. His girlfriend suddenly freezes, her mouth left open. Is that Karen? More images start to flash up on the phone. This guy knows he's She turns in her chair to look at Sam. She's disgusted. I've never been so happy to see this guy sink into his seat. She starts to tear into him. Everything is spilling out about this guy, and I'm happy to have front row seats. My manager comes around the corner, as well as some of the technicians from downstairs from the shouting. My manager looks at me, to them, and then to the screen where a rather unflattering image of this guy on a bed with more varieties of women around him pop up. My manager bites his lip to stop laughing and rests against the wall. This woman has full-on gone now. She slaps Sam and screaming anything she can at him. She runs from the shop screaming how it was over and she couldn't face her friends now. Turns out some of the women in the photos were personal friends of hers. He gets up to leave and yanks his phone from the cable on the desk. This is going to cause issues later as he could corrupt his data yanking it out. The cherry on top. He looks at me and I manage to poker face long enough that he doesn't suspect anything. He doesn't know what to say, he just goldfishes at me. He runs from the store after her shouting for her to come back. I don't see them again. My manager comes over and while laughing tells me not to do that again. The techs are laughing too at the show. This one set off a few red flags for me, so let me know what you guys think. Oh, I also purposely didn't include this part of it because it made me cringe pretty goddamn hard. Let me read it for you. Now, people have read it. I don't condone what I did, nor recommend it, but you have to understand that once in a lifetime, the nice guy has a dark moment, and this was mine.
Hey, man, to the outro. Don't forget that this whole thing is pretty much brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code EYES at checkout. If you like caffeine, this is basically the thing for you. Not to mention, every sale made using code EYES at checkout gets me a little bit in return. You support the channel by using that code. Plus, GamerSupps isn't chock full of that extra stuff that you would find in a pre-workout blend, so you can get that caffeine that you love without putting stuff in your system that's made for you to be exercising with it, which is phenomenal. I love this stuff. I actively use it. Personally, my current favorite flavor is actually Dragon Fruit Punch or Soda Pressing Pear. These two, love them so much. Drink them on a daily basis, essentially. So yeah, go use code EYES at checkout and support the channel. They also have a section, so if you don't like anime, you don't have to have a bunch of degenerate shit.